Yeah.
You're going to have to reduce your.
Got it. I got the recording going right now. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Thank you for joining in. My name is Roger Daviston. I'm an executive and business coach. I do leadership development and personal growth development for people in the context of business. I've been doing it for about 16 years. This is how to build business through better relationships. I work in the context of business, and Michael works in the context of marriage and family therapy. This is Dr. Michael Seaman. Michael, introduce yourself and tell everybody what you do.
I've been doing marriage and family therapy now for 30 years, and I do some consulting with business and industry, and I specialize in looking at a system as a couple or a family or an organization. So I have found this kind of work interesting and intriguing, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Michael
So
and I
glad to be here with Roger.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Michael and I have begun to work together to some extent, helping businesses. One of my frustrations is I'll get into business and begin to teach things, and then I see it really don't see them. I experience roadblocks because all of the dysfunction in the corporate culture, which is no different from the family. And Michael has helped me with some of those things through the years, and we're beginning to work together to help people make these changes because the culture of the business is real similar to the family. Everybody brings their dysfunction into the culture. I want to say a little bit about how I got here and how Michael has helped me in my business career. I met Michael 30 years ago, 1989 or 1990. And I was sat in his office because I had a bad marriage. And Michael, one time you told me I had been to see you 90 hours at one point. I don't know if you remember that or not.
I don't remember that, but that's a lot of hours.
But I began to Michael would teach me these principles, and I would hear them in the context of the marriage, but I never did really grasp some things until I saw it in the context of business. And I was sitting in Sandler Sales Institute, which is a sales class, many years ago, and Sandler hung out with a therapist. That was the interesting thing about that class. And I began to hear some things. I began to hear similar messages about here's the process of sales, here's what's going on in the relationship in the business context. And so there was a principle that you taught me, and I saw it in the context of sales, just like that, like it clicked. And then I saw it in the context of the marriage, because first I had to see it in the business. And I began to take some of those principles and use them in the marriage because I began to see them in the business, but it helped me in the marriage, and it also helped me in the business. And we're going to talk today about Edwin Friedman and Friedman's Fables. You taught me some of these principles that you learned from him.
Yep.
And I want you to share with the audience who he is and what Friedman's Fables is.
Edwin Friedman was a rabbi, and he was an expert in family systems theory. He wrote a book titled Friedman's Fables, and in this book there are 22 different fables, and of course a fable is nothing more than a short story with a meaning. And these are fanciful fables, and they're incredibly imaginative, and what he's done is he's illustrated different concepts in systems, whether it's an individual's system, a couple's system, a family system. He uses nature, he uses all kinds of different situations to illustrate the ideas in family systems. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to look tonight at one of the fables titled The Bridge. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the best fables that I've ever come across because it illustrates growth. And we're going to play it tonight and help us all think about how does growth occur in the context of business and industry. And this can be applied to couple relationships as well as families.
Mm-hmm. Correct. I'm going to go ahead and drop a link in here, and you guys should be able to hear the fable. And it'll take about 5 minutes to listen to it, and then we'll come back and discuss some of the principles that we learned.
There was a man who had given much thought to what he wanted from life. He had experienced many moods and trials. He had experimented with different ways of living, and he had had his share of both success and failure. At last, he began to see clearly where he wanted to go. Diligently, he searched for the right opportunity. Sometimes he came close, only to be pushed away. Often he applied all his strength and imagination, only to find the path hopelessly blocked. And then, at last, it came. But the opportunity would not wait. It would be made available only for a short time. If it were seen that he was not committed, the opportunity would not come again. Eager to arrive, he started on his journey. With each step, he wanted to move faster. With each thought about his goal, his heart quickened. With each vision of what lay ahead, he found renewed vigor. Strength that had left him since his early youth returned, and desires, all kinds of desires, reawakened from their long dormant positions. Hurrying along, he came upon a bridge that crossed through the middle of a town. It had been built high above a river in order to protect it from the floods of spring. He started across. Then he noticed someone coming from the opposite direction. As they were moving closer, it seemed as though the other was coming to greet him. He could see clearly, however, that he did not know this other person, who was dressed similarly, except for something around his waist. When they were within hailing distance, he could see that what the other had about his waist was a rope. It was wrapped around him many times and probably, if extended, would reach a length of 30 feet. The other began to uncurl the rope, and just as they were coming close, the stranger said, "Pardon me, would you be so kind as to hold the end for a moment?" Surprised by this politely phrased but curious request, he agreed without a thought, reached out, and took it. "Thank you. 2 hands now, and remember, hold tight." Whereupon the other jumped off the bridge. Quickly, the free-falling body hurtled the distance of the rope's length, and from the bridge, the man abruptly felt the pull. He held tight and was almost dragged over the side. He managed to raise himself against the edge, however, and after having caught his breath, looked down at the other dangling close to oblivion. "What are you trying to do?" "Just hold tight." "This is ridiculous," the man thought, and began trying to haul the other in. He could not get the leverage, however. It was as though the weight of the other person and the length of the rope had been carefully calculated in advance, so that together they created counterweight just beyond his strength to bring the other back to safety. "Why did you do this? Remember, if you let go, I will be lost. But I cannot pull you up. I am your responsibility. But I didn't ask for it. If you let go, I am lost." He began to look around for help, but there was no one. How long would he have to wait? Why did this happen to befall him now, just as he was on the verge of true success? He examined the side, searching for a place to tie the rope, some protrusion perhaps, or maybe a hole in the boards. But the railing was unusually uniform in shape. There were no spaces between the boards. There was no way to get rid of this newfound burden, even temporarily. "What do you want?" "Just your help." "How can I help? I cannot pull you in, and there's no place to tie the rope so that I can go and find someone to help me help you." "I know that. Just hang on. That'll be enough. Tie the rope around your waist. It'll be easier." Fearing that his arms could not hold out much longer, he tied the rope around.
hand by curling it around his waist again and again. Together they could do it. Actually, the other could do it by himself, so long as he, standing on the bridge, kept it still and steady. Now listen, I think I know how to save you, and he explained his plan. But the other wasn't interested. You mean you won't help? But I told you I cannot pull you up by myself, and I don't think I can hang on much longer either. You must try. If you fail, I die. The point of decision arrived. What should he do? My life or this other's? And then a new idea, a revelation so new, in fact, it seemed heretical. So alien was it to his traditional way of thinking. I want you to listen carefully because I mean what I'm about to say. I will not accept the position of choice for your life, only for my own. The position of choice for your own life, I hereby give back to you. What do you mean? I mean simply, it's up to you. You decide which way this ends. I will become the counterweight. You do the pulling and bring yourself up. I will even tug a little from here. He began unwinding the rope from around his waist and braced himself anew against the side. You cannot mean what you say. You would not be so selfish. I'm your responsibility. What could be so important that you would let someone die? Please don't do this to me. He waited a moment. There was no change in the tension of the rope. I accept your choice, he said at last, and freed his hands.
That's it.
That's it. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah.
Okay. So Michael, tell me what the significance of that fable is.
You know, Roger, there are several factors that play into the significance of this fable. One is that this fable illustrates the concept of growth. Growth in a relationship looks like a moment in time where a person lets go, and in the process of just letting go, that happens with all kinds of things, primarily emotional things. And growth also looks like a process where in the fable, and obviously in the story, one person lets go of the rope and he's encouraging the other person dangling below to pull himself up the rope. Mm-hmm. Now, the significance of this is that we are all in both places. We have things that we need to let go of, and we have things that we've got to do to engage in a process of pulling ourselves up the rope. Mm-hmm. And so the significance of this, the first significance is that it provides a way of thinking about growth in relationships. Mm-hmm. So the example here is really simple, and that is to grow, you've got to let go of some things. At the same time, you've got to pull yourself up the rope. Yeah. So you can't grow in a relationship unless you let go of something first. Mm-hmm. Most folks feel stuck, trapped. Sometimes gets to the point of feeling some resentment or even emptiness. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to let go of what's already in place, and then start the process of pulling yourself up the rope. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's the first concept that's important in terms of this fable. A personal example is I live in Birmingham, and my daughter I just took her to Mobile yesterday, and she's going to start an internship in occupational therapy. And so yesterday I took her down there, and I had to let go of my protectiveness of her. I had to let go of how she's been right here in Birmingham for several years. And so my 25-year-old daughter is now in Mobile, and letting go of that proximity is not easy. Mm-hmm. But letting that go, letting her go, but also pulling myself up the rope in terms of actively taking her down there, thinking about what kinds of things does she need, helping her think about that. And that's just the process. Mm-hmm. So that's a personal example that I have to offer here in terms of both letting go and pulling myself up the rope. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This afternoon, we helped a gentleman in business, in the context of business, who needed to pull himself up the rope. And it was really about him letting go. And in the context of business, it's significant too. I want to share with you a particular problem that I have in the context of business. I'll just let the audience know I work primarily in the heating and air conditioning and plumbing business. And an owner will bring me in and hire me to help the technicians communicate better with the prospect or the client. And one of the things that I teach the technicians how to do is to present options. But the technician has a tendency to take the ownership or the responsibility for making the choice upon himself and doesn't give that ownership to the client. And just as an example, let's take a water heater, for example. A water heater here in the New Jersey, New York City area, if it's just a 40 or 50 gallon water heater, if it's easy, one in, one out, probably about $1,600. And there are lots of accessories that you can put on a water heater to make it better, to make it safer, to make it more reliable, to make it more efficient. And homeowners don't know this. And a lot of times, if you'll give a homeowner a choice, they will decide, well, that's something that I do want. And it's not really about need so much as it's, I didn't know that was available. I want that. The business is changing and technology is changing, and there are lots of sophisticated things that you can put on water heaters that help. And so option number one might be just water heater, $1,500–$1,600. Option number two might be a drain pan under the water heater with a drain line. And the reason that that's a good thing is because sometimes when water heaters break, they flood. And if a water heater decides to flood and it has a drain pan under it and a drain line, there's no insurance claim. So that's a safety and a convenience issue. And if you're in a 2-story house, it could really be a big deal if the water heater is above you. And that option is a couple $100 or more. So now we got $1,600. Now we're up to $1,800. Well, you can also put another option on a water heater that's really a safety feature. And if you ever have a water heater that does flood, you can put a sensor in the pan. It senses waters where it shouldn't be, and it will cut the water off to the water heater, and it'll also cut the gas off to the water heater. So everything just shuts down. And the only thing that happens is you have 40 gallons of water that drain out, and instead of it running like an open faucet. And that might be, say, $2,500. And then you could have another option where, companies make mixing valves where you could put on the water heater, where you can turn the water heater all the way up. And the water heater works more efficiently that way. But we don't do that because it can scald you and be too hot. So you can put another accessory on a water heater called a mixing valve. And then, an example, we're probably up to about $3,000. The technician has a hard time. They're scared and they fear showing that to the customer because they have issues with, I need to take on this responsibility for the client. How do I help a technician like that? How do we help them make that change?
So what specific responsibility are they taking on for the client when they present these options for the client? What kind of what are they taking on themselves?
Well, I've had clients tell people, you don't need that, just put in the water heater.
Okay. So why would a technician make the decision for the client? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you're breaking up, and I can't see you. We've lost we got a poor internet connection. Go ahead, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Why do you think that the technician would take on that responsibility of making that decision for the client?
Personally, I think that they have a mindset that they rescue people, they fix things very fast, and they take on the responsibility that they shouldn't. They're just, I don't know, is it a habit?
Roger, I think that it's an emotional thing where they're probably so focused on making sure that the client is okay that the result of that is they can't tolerate any distance between their particular position, what they would choose,
Mm-hmm.
and the client might choose.
Mm-hmm.
So a technician might say, well, you know what? It's obvious that they need just the standard water heater. I don't want to even present the possibilities of the drain pan or the valve or the higher end possibilities, because I wouldn't choose that. And so because I wouldn't choose that, why should the client even given that possibility? I'm just wasting their time.
Mm-hmm.
They'd never want it. And the problem there is that the technician is thinking that the client should think like they think.
Correct.
And they're not allowing distance to be there without feeling guilty. If they present the options, they're feeling like, you know what, I wouldn't choose this, so why would somebody else choose it? And that's the problem in the thought process.
Okay. Now, how does the rope come into play here? How do we use the rope to help them let go, so to speak? Explain that to us.
What has to happen is that technician has to let go of their guilt, of their fear that the client's not going to appreciate them offering these options.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing that technician has to let go of.
Mm-hmm.
His
Mm-hmm.
fear, his anxiety of how's that customer going to respond by my offering things that I wouldn't even choose myself.
Mm-hmm. We have a comment here. This Michael Clemens says that there's a fear of giving a higher price, and Michael's right. And I do want to talk about this because I do see a lot of cases where salespeople, technicians, even salespeople have an emotional fear of talking about money, just period. I know in the South, I grew up in the South, and I know in the South it's considered rude to talk about money, especially other people's money. And Michael, I can remember when Emily, my oldest daughter, was 6 years old, and she was having awareness about value and money. And you know where we lived, it was a big house, huge house, and we were at the dinner table, and Emily said, "Mama, how much does this house cost?" Kind of looking around like that. And Mama slammed her foot on the floor and said, "We don't talk about money." So Emily grows up and get a sales job, and the sales manager says, "You got to talk about budget and money," and she can't.
How can she do that when growing up in the home, that was taboo? She couldn't be a good daughter and talk about money at the same time. So how can she be a good salesperson and talk about money now?
It's about being good.
It's all about being good.
And being accepted.
That's right. And if that doesn't happen in a person's family of origin, the question really is one question. Roger, after 30 years of doing this counseling, I've come to really just one question. Yeah. And the question is this: how does a person, and you're in the particular example you've given us, how does Emily disagree or be different from her mother and still be a good daughter? And so, how does the salesperson disagree with the boss or the client and still be a good salesperson?
Mm-hmm.
How do you talk about money and still be a good salesperson? Mm-hmm. How do you differ with another person and still be okay?
Yeah.
Question.
And so when you make that choice that you're going to talk about money, you let go of that fear.
You have to
then you just begin to talk about it. And the process of letting go is I'm climbing up this fear. I'm climbing up this money rope, and I'm going to talk about it and get over it.
Just by virtue of talking about it, by virtue of finding a way to talk about it, you're pulling yourself up the rope.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to let go of not just fear, but what they're going to think of you.
Yeah.
And it has everything to do sometimes with avoiding conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And so that all goes back to a person's family of origin too. What does conflict mean?
Mm-hmm.
How can I disagree with you,
mm-hmm.
or be different from you, and still be a good person?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me give you an example of how I had to learn how to talk about money. I never saw it as letting go of my fear. I saw it as just doing something I needed to do, but it's really both.
Okay.
I'm sitting in a banker's office when I first started this business 16 years ago, and I'm scared to death. I never worked for a bank. I got to talk to this guy about money, and it's going to be expensive. And I have a process that I learned from Sandler. You talk about pain, then you talk about money. And there's no need to do a fancy dancy presentation. I got to see if the guy's got any money or budget or whatever. And so I'll never forget this. I kind of sat up in my chair, and now I don't know, I'm probably 38 years old at the time, 40, and Reed's about retired, and I'm scared to death, sitting there talking to him. And I said, Reed, I know we've talked a lot about this and that and the other, but is it okay if we talk about money now? And he leaned back in his chair, president of the bank, and said, yeah, and I got a lot of it.
Okay.
So what that did for me is I relaxed.
Yeah.
He didn't have a problem talking about money.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had a problem talking about money, I wouldn't have gotten any of his.
So his joining with you, his letting you know he was fine talking about money, just took all the anxiety right out of the situation.
Took all the pressure off. Yeah. And I talk about money now. I have to. And I've gotten over that. But it was something I had. Emily had it. I had it. Emily got it. It's all over the culture. It's in a lot of places.
Yeah. Let's talk about second concept here that's really good from this fable, and that is it provides people with a language for talking about growth. There are times where people need to let go. There are times, obviously, when they have to pull themselves up the rope. Roger, I did a presentation to a nursing unit on the bridge fable probably 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then 10 years after that, I had a client come in and say, you know what? It's amazing to me. She was from that nursing unit. She came in and said, Dr. Seaman, we still talk about that fable about what are you doing to let go and what are you doing to pull yourself up the rope? Mm-hmm. So they still use that language as a language to help them think about growth. Yeah. And I think that's another value that this fable brings to people.
Yeah, it gives you a context and a metaphor to help people make change. I have clients that say, we got to have that rope talk with so-and-so.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And I had to have a rope talk with my son, Andrew. Can I tell you that story?
Tell me that story, Rachi.
Andrew is doing really well now, but I'll tell you, he wasn't doing well 4 or 5 years ago. And his mother and I are divorced, and I hadn't had any influence on him in positive way since he was probably 13 or 12 even. And he went to college and flunked out. He went back to school again and flunked out. And now he's living in this particular time, he's living in his mother's basement and really not doing anything, not contributing, not working, sleeping all day, staying up all night, playing computer games, probably drinking a lot, doing who knows what. I wasn't there. I just heard about it. And so he calls me one day, and I'm riding my bicycle one late Friday afternoon. He said, hey, Mom kicked me out of the house. So she dropped the rope. And I said, good. She should have. I would have kicked you out a long time ago. And he said, well, I don't have any money. I need money. And I said, okay. Go online. I gave him that. I told him about the link I put in the chat. Download the fable, read the bridge, call me back. Now, to me, that was, if he'll download the fable and read the bridge, that's climbing up the rope a little. He's taking some initiative. So he called me back and said he read the bridge. And then I gave him the bridge talk, the rope talk. You have to have the rope talk with employees sometimes. And I said, Andrew, here's what climbing up the rope looks like from my perspective. You will get a job. If you lose that job, you'll find another job. You'll find a place to live, some roommates. You'll begin to pay your bills, and you'll begin to function like a normal person. You'll take care of yourself. My life is my responsibility. Your life is your responsibility. And I will hold the rope and help you if you will climb. He said, okay, send money. Now, sending money wasn't climbing up the rope, was it? I never told her that. And I said, no, I'm not sending money. I don't know. He said, well, what am I going to do? I said, I don't know. I said, let me think about it. And that's something you told me, Michael. You taught me that principle years ago. Said, Roger, you have the right to take time to think. And I just, you've taught me to sit still. Sometimes the best thing you do is just sit still. And so I told him I didn't know we'd talk further. And I came and talked to my wife, Ina. We came up with an idea together that I could buy him Subway meals, $100 Subway meals. He lived 1,000 miles from me. So I called a Subway sandwich shop close to where he was going to live, sent him $100 credit card. He got his meals. They kept his card for him, and he had plenty to eat. All right. He began to climb. He found a job, found a place to live, but it was hard, man. It was hurting me. He was making little tiny progress. And but I did hold the rope. I did some things for him. I fixed his truck for $700. I bought him some clothes. I spent some more money on some other things, but I never enabled him by giving him money. And it was hard on him. And he called me one day after he was making some progress and said, Dad, I got good news. I said, what is it? He said, I'm going back to Mom's. Okay. So he took the rope out of my hands and gave it to her because he can dangle there.
Yes.
And he wound up in a lot of trouble, had to go through some probationary period for 1.5 years. Had to do drug testing for 1.5 years. And that helped him because they don't hold the rope for you.
They don't hold the rope.
And the good news is he had to go through some of that adversity and persevered. And he has a business now. He's doing a lot better, taking responsibility. Actually, what he's doing, Michael, that's really exciting for me is he is taking initiative.
Okay.
He's doing things for himself on his own, taking initiative. And he would have never gotten there if we'd have kept enabling him. That's
right. Roger, it sounds like you did a good thing in that you did for him what he could not do for himself. And so that's the difference between enabling and helping someone in ways that they need help. And mm-hmm. enabling is always doing for somebody what they could do for themselves. Mm-hmm. And you obviously did some things for your son that he could mm-hmm. not do for himself. Mm-hmm. Roger, this is one fable in a book of 22 fables. And the author has an epilogue at the end of the book where all the different characters speak to each other. And it's a fascinating book. But what happens is at the end of the book, the man on the bridge encounters the dangling man and asks him, by the way, what did you do after you hit the water? The dangling man says, well, I said to myself, you win a few and you lose a few. Mm-hmm. Then I swam to shore, I got another rope, and I waited for the next person to pass by. Yeah. So I often ask my clients, tell me, was this guy dangling ever going to pull himself up that rope? No. He'd been there many times before, and he would be there many times afterwards. Mm-hmm. Because conceptually, all he thought he had to do was hand someone his rope, mm-hmm. jump off the bridge, and dangle below. He was never going to pull himself up the rope. That wasn't in his wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. That wasn't part of what he was ever going to do. Mm-hmm. So in a relationship like this, where the person dangling below is making it sound like a matter of life and death, they often know they're not going to pull themselves up the rope. And so this is another real value of this fable is learning when you're in an unproductive situation, how you know whether to hold the rope or not. Mm-hmm. And so it seems to me that if somebody is dangling below and they're not pulling themselves up the rope, in a personal relationship, the most loving thing to do is to let go of that rope. Mm-hmm. At the same time, when a person dangling below is actively pulling themselves up the rope, and in your example, Andrew's progress was small, but right. he was working to pull himself up that rope, and you held the rope for him. Mm-hmm. Now, in business, when a person, a technician or an employee is dangling below, and they're not pulling themselves up the rope, then the most responsible thing to do is at least have the I'm going to let go of the rope conversation. And then eventually, if that continues, the most responsible thing to do is to let go of the rope.
Right, to let go of the rope. And Michael, what I see in business is people don't realize that they're holding a rope. They just know that they're frustrated. There's sometimes a good bit of anger and a lot of frustration, and there is resentment. And the other thing I see is they're the people they don't realize they're holding the rope, but man, they are so freaking busy.
You know, Roger, one way to know that you're holding the rope is that frustration is there.
Yeah.
In a relationship, if you've got anger, resentment, feeling empty, depressed, just worn out, you're probably holding a number of ropes, and there are probably a number of folks who are dangling who have no intention of pulling themselves up the rope.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we're really talking about is ownership.
Mm-hmm.
That person who's on that bridge holding multiple ropes isn't anymore owning the limited position they have than the people dangling below, because they're not taking ownership of their position either, of how to pull themselves up the rope.
Explain that again. I'm not sure I understand that. How does the person that's holding the rope not taking ownership? He's taking too much ownership, isn't he?
Well, that's exactly right. He's taking ownership of their part.
Right.
Taking ownership of his part. It really comes down to boundaries.
Uh-huh.
And so what's interesting to me, too, is the person dangling below could also be so focused on the person on the bridge that they're not even thinking their own thoughts. They could be so focused on what does the boss want. They're not even thinking about what they need to do to take ownership of their role in the company. And so they could be equally over-focused on him or her as that employer is focused on what the employees are doing. So it goes both ways in terms of being over-focused on each other. And the result is the person on the bridge is experiencing this frustration. And what's interesting to me is there's a concept in relationship theory called parallel process. If the person on the bridge is experiencing frustration, then you can almost always know the person dangling below is equally frustrated, just in different ways and for different reasons.
Yeah. And it may be in a little different context.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is that in a relationship where you have gratitude and a person is grateful to be on that bridge and the person is grateful to be dangling and they're actively pulling themselves up that rope, when you have people who are grateful for each other, that's a healthy system.
Those are the kinds of people that I can help.
That's exactly right.
And it's really a joy to help those people.
And you like being there.
I love it. But it's really frustrating and not a joy to help that person who resents that I'm there. They resent I'm there.
Yes.
And I'm a bother to them. I'm upsetting their nest and they wish I would go. So they resent me. I don't think I feel resentment toward them. I feel frustration because I can't help them.
That's right. And what happens is, as the consultant, you're coming in there and your role is to change the system. And what you want is your approach to change the system rather than the system to change you.
Correct.
And that's what a good consultant does. He goes in and his thought process changes the thought process of the system.
Yep.
And that makes a huge difference.
And it can really upset the system.
It has to upset the system.
It does upset the system. And then people really have to climb.
And you know what, Roger? Another real value of this fable is that whenever people in the system are thinking along the same lines, they're thinking in terms of how do we let go of things? How do we pull ourselves up the rope? Then a synergy begins to develop in the system itself. And it's like a team. They all are operating on the same page. And when that's happening, it makes a world of difference in the company.
I want to share about the system and how it can upset the how changing the system can really cause it really causes havoc, but it's good havoc. It's like this change needed to occur, but it can be painful.
Okay.
Let me give you an example. We have a man named Jim and Tom, two men named Jim and Tom. They own the business. They're owners, and they're plumbers, but they got a big business, and they have a bookkeeper, and the bookkeeper reports to Jim, but there is no relationship. Jim and the bookkeeper have so much conflict that she doesn't ever talk to him, and he doesn't ever talk to her, but there's tons of frustration, and really there's tons of resentment now that you mention it. So what I saw occurring in the system that was unhealthy was there was a triangle. There was Jim, and then there was the bookkeeper, and then over here there was the other owner, Tom, and the bookkeeper would go to Tom. Okay? Go to Tom. And Tom was over responsible for Jim and her relationship. In fact, without him, their relationship was going to collapse. I didn't realize it. I thought what would happen would be that, when I started coaching Tom, you can't speak for Jim and you can't speak for her. You got to let them speak for each other to one another. And he began to get out of that triangle. Then the bookkeeper at that point was forced to climb. Climbing would look like, I got to relate to the person I need to relate to. And what happened was she wasn't willing to climb. You know what happened?
What happened?
She quit. After 15 years of being in that business, she quit. Now, this was interesting. I get a phone call when she quits from, the two owners. What are we going to do? Right. What are we going to do? And at that point in time, they're dangling.
That's right.
And I'm holding the rope. And I said, here's what we're going to do. Do X, do Y, do Z. I didn't do any of the work. They did. And then I did come in and do some consulting and help with some interviews. But we replaced, we hired a new person in that position within 2 weeks, which was fast. And the business culture and system is so much better. It's amazing.
Roger, let me talk about that in terms of the family system.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is, of course, we all know relationships are built in triangles, and it could have easily been that Jim in the A position and Tom in the B position and your bookkeeper was in the C position. If she growing up in a family would always go to her mom and would never go to her dad, then she would be comfortable going to Tom because that was the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Her growing up experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Take mom out of the equation and you say, okay, bookkeeper, you got to go to Jim and you got to talk to dad. She would rather have quit than go talk to dad. Now, we don't know that, but my point is this, is that the personal dynamics in that triangle were playing out in her life and in their lives.
Uh-huh.
And the key here is for her to have taken the opportunity to kind of leave home, if you will, leave that system and grow up as a person.
Grow up as a person.
She chose not to do that.
Yeah. So we have a 55-year-old grown adult who really emotionally hasn't grown up yet. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. And you gave her an opportunity to kind of leave home, if you will, leave that system and become a more fully functioning adult.
Right.
He let go of the rope, though.
So say again?
He just let go of the rope. She wasn't going to do that.
He did, but it was really hard for him.
Okay.
It took months because it was a pattern in his life. He was comfortable doing that for them.
Yeah.
And, he'd see it and say, yeah, but then he would do it again. And he'd see it and say, yeah, I got to stop doing that. And, there was accountability with both owners, but there was lots of coaching and encouraging him to make that behavioral change.
Well, in that system, all three people had to change.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah. So it gives a platform. This fable gives people a platform for taking ownership, not only of the position they're in a company, but also a platform for taking ownership in their lives personally.
Mm-hmm. Correct. I have another question. How do you, in the context of business, I see a lot of times where a person in the business needs to say no to the boss. And saying no to the boss is climbing.
Yes.
And it is really disturbing to me that the number of people that are afraid of that won't do it, and then will do something that goes strictly against their core values, and they feel bad about themselves, and they do things in the culture that they shouldn't do, don't want to do, and are ashamed of doing.
Okay.
Because they can't say no to the boss. Speak to that in this and use the rope. What's going on there?
No, what can be happening there is the person who ends up feeling obligated to keep the peace and end up with so much resentment toward the boss, toward the authority figure, that what happens is they'll say yes to his face, but they'll act out and say no in other ways.
Oh, I see that all the time.
Yeah, that's what's probably going. I call this will conflict.
Yeah.
In that two people are in a position in their lives, and they're just being more loyal to what they think is fair, right, or reasonable. And that creates a conflict of wills where when people are working against each other, this conflict of wills is the cancer that eats relationships up from inside out. And so I think that's what you're describing, is that the person who just can't say no feels stuck, feels trapped, feels this resentment. And what happens is they work so hard to try to be a good enough employee that what happens is they put that standard of good enough in the hands of the employer. And they end up dangling instead of taking ownership and responsibility for evaluating their own performance and having a sense of identity that says, you know what, I'm going to take the initiative. I'm going to take the responsibility. I'm going to be grateful for this opportunity. And the real fulcrum in this whole process is in receiving freely the opportunity of working in that business.
Being grateful.
That's right.
I want to give you another example where I had a president of a company, a lady who was a very smart lady, a PhD in something physical therapy or something, but she had developed a process for testing backs, and she would sell this licensing process to clinics who would run workman's comp claims through this. People who have bad backs, and they'd go through this process, and it was a very expensive $15,000 license for these hospitals to buy it. And she hired me to help a salesperson who was this person was a complete salesperson. And I was coaching and training and mentoring this girl, and she, I went to the owner. I said, she's a complete salesperson, but the owner had to change, and the salesperson had to change, because really what their problem was will conflict.
Okay.
They were constantly fighting. And here's what it looked like, Michael. The owner was a nice person, but really aggressive, just aggressive. You'll do this, you'll do this. And then the salesperson was exactly what you described. Yes to the face. I'll do what the hell I want to do.
Okay.
We're not getting anything done. So
Yeah.
we have aggressive boss, passive aggressive work salesperson, and I got them both. I really was working with them separately, but I got the CEO to work on herself and become more assertive,
Less aggressive.
less aggressive, but healthy assertiveness.
Yes.
And then I got the salesperson to see her passive aggressive behavior. So you've got to become more assertive.
Yes.
You know, you guys have got to have more open, honest, direct communication with each other. And here's what fixed it. It was motivation. I got the president to agree to give the salesperson off time instead of commission. But it was like, I'm not giving her any time off. She can't have any time off. I said, well, what do you want? Work in the seat or outcome? And she said, well, the outcome. I said, this is her motivation. I've talked to her. You give her Fridays off if she's reached a certain goal on Thursday. And she agreed to do that. And her sales went up 30%. But it had nothing to do with sales ability. It had nothing to do with skills. But it had everything to do with the relationship between those two.
You know, Roger, I would suggest to you that sales really has nothing to do with the product, with very little to do with the price, and everything to do with trust.
Uh-huh.
It has to do, really, it starts with one word, and this is the most important word in all relationships, and that's listening.
Yep. I agree with you.
I define listening as emptying yourself of your agenda to hear and know the other person.
Right.
When a person listens at that level, they empty themselves in humility,
Uh-huh.
and they empty themselves of their agenda, whatever that agenda is.
Yeah.
Then that's where you can develop trust and you can start to know somebody.
All right. What is the salesperson's agenda when he goes, if he's got to empty himself of his agenda, what's his agenda?
To try to get that sale.
That's right.
The harder they try to get that sale, the less likely it is they're going to get the sale.
That's correct.
So what they have to do is they have to step back from that agenda. They have to empty themselves of that agenda, and then they have to join with the client or the customer.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Michael, we've got about 10 more minutes before the end of the show, and I'd like to invite whoever's listening in who would like to call in. And if you have any questions for Michael or myself, you're free to join in. If not, we certainly understand. But Michael, is there anything else you'd like to add to tonight's?
Yeah, I'd like to tell you a story about a time when I was looking for drapes.
Okay.
And, I'm not a big interior decorator, but I went to JCPenney's and I was looking for drapes. And this salesperson right there, she said, well, we have our drapes on sale, and this is 20% off of our drapes. I was looking at them, and I found some.
I can't hear
so
you. You're going to have to say all that again. I can't hear you. You got such a bad internet connection. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You don't have to go back to the beginning, but I lost you when you said you're going to JCPenney to get some drapes. Just start over.
And so I got there, and this salesperson, they had a sale on drapes, 20% off. And she said, here's, do you have the coupon? And I didn't have the coupon for 20% off. And so she says, here, I've got the flyer. We'll get you the 20% off. And then she said, besides that, here, I'm going to give you my employee discount in addition to the 20% off if you'll get the drapes today. And so what she did, Roger, was she joined with me in terms of we stood there for probably 20, 25 minutes. And I don't know how legitimate it was for her to use her employee discount. But she won me over because she was doing so much to try to help me find those drapes and gave me the discount, the flyer, and her discount. It's like, I can't believe this woman is on my side as much as she is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bought the drapes. I still have those drapes.
Why did she give you her employee discount?
I don't know. You'd have to ask her. But
Yeah.
I know this, that her willingness to go that far with
Mm-hmm.
me had me buy the drapes.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. I want you to mention you taught me this recently, but I agree with you and I teach it. But you give such good examples with the triangles about why that is. But that's a good example. But talk to the audience about the A, B, C position and how important it is to keep the product in the C position.
You know, all relationships are built in triangles, Roger, and that means that in a person's life, they're always at A. And in your life, you're at A. In my life, I'm at A. And
Mm-hmm.
what happens is the B position is the position of priority, value, commitment. Everybody wants to be at B in another person's life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whomever you put at B, that means everything else and everybody else goes out here to the C position.
Mm-hmm.
And so when a technician or a salesperson goes to make that sale, then the customer is always thinking that in the life of that salesperson cares more about the money than about the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And so the C position is on the outside of A and B.
Mm-hmm.
And so what the salesperson has to do is overcome the customer's suspicion that really all the salesperson cares about is making the sale. And so in the salesperson's life, what he's wed to is not the customer, but his sale. And that puts the customer out here.
Right.
What the salesperson has to do is convince that customer that the customer's right at B,
Mm-hmm.
and that the money or the sale is at C.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes an effective salesperson.
Yes. And that's such a good analogy. I've always told salespeople, focus on the relationship with the customer,
Right.
not the money.
That's right.
Because the salesperson that focuses on the relationship will have more money.
That's right.
Especially through time.
Yeah.
Maybe not today. Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't make sense today. Maybe today's not the right timing. Who knows? But if you'll focus on that relationship, you'll be there when it is time.
You know, Roger, as a marriage and family therapist, what I do is I work by the hour. And what happens is a lot of folks will come in and they will expect that I'm going to say, you need to be here weekly for the next 6 weeks. I don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I have folks come in, and if I feel like they need to go every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks and come in, then I tell them that because they need time to do some of the exercises that we talk about. And that blows them away because I'm not interested in trying to get them to come back in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in getting them what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And that may not be a weekly, every week session with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so when I show myself trustworthy to say, you know what, you don't need to come in here every week. We need to have more time between sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Then they appreciate that because I'm showing them that they're in my B position.
Mm-hmm.
And whether they come in or not is in the C position.
Right. Right. And I agree with that. Michael, anything else before we wrap it up? We got just about a minute to go.
I would say that everybody is a salesman.
They are.
Everybody's in sales. And the more effective we are in being good salespeople, then the better relationships we develop with other people.
Yes, that's right. And for those of you that joined in tonight, we really appreciate it. Please subscribe to our show. We're going to be here every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to talk about a lot of interesting topics in the context of building your business through better relationships. We have the relationship expert here. And every time I meet with Michael, I learn something new. Michael, I want to do some shows on how to ask for what you want. I think we need to do some shows on conflict and how to deal with conflict in a healthy manner, because a lot of what we talked about tonight was people who wanted to avoid that.
Right.
And so I'm excited about this series, and we appreciate you coming in, and please subscribe and come back. We enjoyed it.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.